Dennis, welcome to the Bitcoin Infinity Show. Great to have you here.
Great to be here. Great to see you. How have you been?
All good. How have you been? It's been quite a while since we met. I've been in Lugano, right? Last year, I think. So
Yeah.
not that long ago.
Not too bad. October,
no.
I think that was last year.
Are you coming this year?
Maybe. Depends. I wasn't planning on it. A lot of my work has been pulling me into DC these days, so I've cut out a lot of my international travel, but there's definitely some stuff happening in the Bitcoin development space that could pull me different directions. So we'll be seeing a TBD on international travel. It might boot up again. We'll see.
Yeah, and Lugano is always a spectacular place to go. I think it's one of my favorite cities in Europe. But the people who don't know you that are watching this show, can you give them a TLDR on Dennis Porter and what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Satoshi Action Fund and the president and founder of Satoshi Action Education. Those are a pair of nonprofits that educate lawmakers and regulators on the benefits of Bitcoin, and they also craft academic works to try to help combat some of the FUD around Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. As an example, when a lot of the Greenpeace FUD was coming out around Bitcoin mining, we really got to work trying to prove that there were benefits to the technology, including the ability to balance the grid and mitigate methane emissions from landfills and orphaned oil wells. And ultimately, we were so good at fighting back against the FUD that Greenpeace put out a big report, and they labeled us as the most effective and aggressive Bitcoin advocacy group in the country. So we've been in the trenches fighting for Bitcoin, and I'm a longtime Bitcoiner, I guess you could say now, 2017. What is that, 8 years? So it's almost a decade. We're getting close to a decade. So I feel like I've put in my time. Started off as a lowly pleb online and just studied Bitcoin and as much as I possibly can. I was, born into the block size wars where it was sort of coming to an end, or like at least coming to the final, sort of scene or final reel of the back and forth. And, took a lot away from that. Ultimately really sided with the small blocks and wanted to be someone who was really big on defending decentralization and making sure nodes could participate. And that's a big part of, where I land on, or why I land where I do on the Knots versus core debate, which we can talk about that as well. But yeah, I've just been out here fighting, pushing for policy changes in the near term. My team has passed 9 bills into law in 8 different states to protect the right to self-custody, the right to mine, the right to transact peer-to-peer, the right to run a node. We also passed the first strategic Bitcoin reserve bill into law based off our model policy in New Hampshire. And yeah, we've just been continuing to work. Now we're really focused on market structure in Washington, D.C., which is very, very boring. But funny enough, we said we saw each other last time in Lugano. I did a whole big talk on why regulations matter. And, we can get into that as well.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, first of all, the Greenpeace thing, I think when you're a Bitcoiner, it's so easy to see the world through this follow the money lens. So it was so obvious to all the Bitcoiners that Greenpeace was corrupted. And the XRP shitcoin funding Greenpeace to say these things, to shit talk Bitcoin, basically trash talk Bitcoin. It's like, to me, that was obvious.
Well, the Ripple people will tell you it was Chris's fault. He's like one of the co-founders, I think, or something. They're like, no, we had nothing to do with that. They finally are like, they donated the skull and all that too. So it's fine. It's come full circle, and they don't want anything to do with it.
No, but still, like, even if maybe it's harsh to call it corruption, but this follow the money, like, give me the immense incentives and I will show you the outcome. Yeah. Like, it's so obvious, and I think a lot of that plays into all the other drama in and at the edges of the Bitcoin sphere.
It's not like Greenpeace just woke up and was like, this is a really just fight to have. No, they got $5 million to go do it. Like, they got paid. So, and that's unfortunately, the problem. There's money. The problem with money is it can be used for very perverse things. Obviously people fight for Bitcoin because there is a lot of problems with money, and not just the ability to pay off nonprofit organizations, and not just the ability to pay off politicians, but the ability to sort of, actually change the course of history, because you can give yourself a money printer and really start to use it to advance your side and just sort of destroy the other side. So yeah, definitely. There's some concerns I also have in the development space in Bitcoin too, but yeah, I'll wait to jump into all of that because I know we have a lot to go.
Yeah, and it's a field where you need to tread lightly because you don't want to throw out accusations there that you can't really back up. But it's like the Upton Sinclair quote: "It's hard to make a man change his opinions when his bread and butter, I'm paraphrasing here, but when his salary depends on him having that certain opinion."
That's correct.
So I think it's more that I mean, I don't think that everyone in Greenpeace is a greedy, corrupt idiot. That's not what I'm saying. It's just, if you don't know anything about money or sound money or anything, like if you're not educated in that, if some guy comes to you with like, here, look, we also have a cryptocurrency, it's much more environmentally friendly, and by the way, here's $5 million, then that's it's easy to follow that narrative, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that brings us to the whole politics thing. Yeah, there are many different opinions on how Bitcoiners should approach politics and politicians. I mean, this is founded on anarcho-capitalistic principles, if you want. Like, the ultimate goal is to separate money and state, which to me that means the state has no money in the end because it's all separated. But we can get into all that. But and there's this question that I like to ask people: what do you prefer, a pro-Bitcoin politician or an anti-Bitcoin politician? Because there is this notion of them allowing you to run a node. If they can dictate what a node is, then it's just like property tax, that you don't really own your house if you're forced to pay someone to live in it via gun threat every year. So it's sort of the same thing. I can understand both perspectives. I think hyper-Bitcoinization is inevitable, and I think the ride will be smoother if we have the politicians on our side. I'd just like to know your view on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm clearly a person who believes in engaging politically, given that I've bent the last 3 years of my life around that process. At the end of the day, there's a couple things to keep in mind. The first one being that everything that we do politically, it doesn't necessarily need to revolve around, asking permission as much as it is just using the tools in our toolbox to prevent the government from abusing our ability to access, whether it be a node, whether it be buying, selling, trading Bitcoin, whether it be transacting peer-to-peer or mining. I would say think of it a lot in the same lens as you would think about, why the Constitution exists. Like, the vast majority of the Constitution is like telling the government what it cannot do. It's freedom of speech. The reason why our freedom of speech is protected predominantly in the United States is because of the Constitution. And so at Satoshi Action, we wanted to extend those rights or the ability to access Bitcoin. And we started doing that at the state level, and we've passed it into law, and I think we're at 6 or 7 states now, and now 20 million Americans have that right protected. And because of the United States, there's a really interesting design here too. So what the states do matters a lot more in policy than it does for most parts of the world. To have a political subdivision, which means anything below, the very, very top of the food chain. So, in the United States, that is the federal government. And then you have, generally speaking, right below that, the states. And then you have, counties and cities, and those are all political subdivisions of each other. And in most parts of the world, political subdivisions, like the people at the very top, have absolute power. Like, there's no wiggle room for like a city or a county or, another sort of manifestation of what like a state would look like. In Canada, that would be like a province. To be able to sort of just be like, F you, we're doing whatever the hell we want to the federal government. Well, in the United States, that is possible because there is a part in the Constitution where it protects the ability for states to be somewhat autonomous. And so even if we don't pass this in every state, or even if we don't pass this at the federal level, the great thing is by having these rights in place, is you create this disconnect between the state and the federal government, where if the federal government wakes up and is like, actually, we are going to ban self-custody, like, you just straight up cannot have it. Like it's not allowed. And they go to those states where they've protected the right to self-custody, creates a powerful protection for users because the state cannot be weaponized against the user by the federal government. The opposite is true like, let's say the states are like either neutral on it or they're in alignment with the federal government. The federal government shows up and it can weaponize local law enforcement against the users. And that's exactly what happened sort of like in the cannabis story, right? Like there's a really good comparison of like how to understand what happens and doesn't happen in these situations because we have a clear example. For decades, cannabis was illegal at the state and federal level. And in the war on drugs, like even just small amounts of cannabis would get you thrown in jail. I mean, we have people in jail today even still that are like, small amounts of cannabis and they're in jail for like 10 years. And so what happens though is the federal government shows up and it actually utilizes local law enforcement and empowers them to go after who they see as criminals. But if you do not have the state on your side, and the state in fact has legalized cannabis, which has happened since, back in that time when it was totally legal everywhere, we've got, I think 75% of the states now pro-cannabis books on the laws on the books. And what the federal government can't just show up and go, okay, well, you guys need to go do this for us. Go, here you go. Here's some money. Here's some resources. Like, go take out these, cannabis users. And that makes it extremely difficult for the federal government. And actually, to the extent that they basically don't participate in that activity anymore in the states where cannabis is legal. It's even though it's a federal crime, like the ability for the federal government to come in and actually enforce those laws is very difficult at the local level. They just don't really have the resources to do that writ large. And so they've really sort of taken a step back from enforcing their own, cannabis laws, which are, saying that you can't even own it, you can't sell it, you can't distribute it, because they don't have the state on their side. They don't have the state in their corner because they depend on state local law enforcement. So same thing is true for Bitcoin, right? Like we woke up and we were like, wow, this is 2022, by the way, remember, this is pre where we are today, where everyone seems to be ready to jump on the Bitcoin bandwagon in the political space. Well, not everyone, but a big chunk of people. But when we started, it was like FTX was collapsing. Like they were trying to write like backdoor bans on self-custody. They were trying to ban Bitcoin mining all over the country. Like it was a full-blown warfare against Bitcoin. And so we woke up as an organization in June of 2022. That's when we launched officially. We were, of course, doing some work before then. And we thought, where can we be the most effective? Where can we go and score wins, change the tide, really, really shift the narrative? And it was to start at the states and meticulously go state by state and start passing laws to protect the ability to engage with Bitcoin. And that worked really well. In fact, it worked flawlessly. And then ultimately, that led to, I think a lot of the changes that we're seeing today in a small part at the federal level. Of course, many other people have made a big difference there, but there's been studies done that have shown that when you see a flurry of activity for a policy at the state level, you see this federal reaction. And that's just to put it in context, it's not just that the 9 laws we passed in 8 different states. Like we were working on, I don't know, like we've worked on like 80 bills or something crazy like that. Just us in half the country. Half the country has introduced our model policy. So that's a significant flurry of activity, and then federal lawmakers looking at that going like, well, this is not even really going to work if we try to go, hammer down on these guys. And also, wow, my own state is getting behind this stuff. Like I gotta watch out. I don't want to lose my seat if all my folks down at home are getting behind this technology. So again, I don't want it to overstate our importance at the federal level, but it's not hard to see that lawmakers are looking at what's going on and saying, maybe I'm wrong on this. And even if I think I'm right, I also need to care about my political power that I've accumulated. And I don't want to be out of bounds with where other people are going and my own state is going. So I certainly believe it's important to engage politically. I do appreciate and respect the viewpoint that people don't want to engage because it is a nasty space and it is full of charlatans and power-hungry egomaniacs who don't care about anything other than amassing wealth and power for themselves and their ultra high net worth donors. I see it up close and personal every day. And people oftentimes wonder, like, how are you able to do so much when you're not just like paying all these people off? Like people legitimately thought like, you guys have to be doing something like nefarious because we were winning so much. And it, really just comes down to strategy and tactics and knowing the system and having good team members that are dedicated to the cause. And that's rare. You're not going to find that everywhere. But my hope was by doing it this way, doing it the right way, that people would also go, oh, we can engage and win. But one thing I would like to leave on this last point here before I go is also go where you can win. Don't go and be a martyr, right? Like politics is not about being a martyr. That's the opposite of what you want to do. Never just like see something wrong and go, I'm just going to go blast that open and go, fight to the death. There's a famous quote where they basically say, I'll paraphrase. I'm always paraphrasing my quotes, by the way. It's because I have ADHD style memory.
Don't we all?
I think that's like a common trait in Bitcoin space. So we're all like super focused on Bitcoin. Our ADHD won't let us pay attention to anything else. You owe it to your values to know how to win, is the quote. And it's in the political space. If you really want to make a difference, you need to know how to actually like win. And being a martyr is not how you win. And a lot of people love to be martyrs in politics all the time. You get famous for it, actually. That's a sad part about being a martyr in politics is you can go, pound the table and you can stick it to the politicians and really get in their face and make a social media moment out of it. And you might get a lot of clicks and a lot of likes, but that doesn't mean you're going to change policy. That doesn't mean you're going to change the law. That doesn't mean you're going to change the hearts and minds of the lawmakers. So that was always our goal when we started. And that's why we started at the state level. We started with what seems sort of like fairly innocuous policy instead of like going like doing something totally crazy. Like it's really important that you always stay somewhat within the window, the Overton window. Like you don't want to go so far out to the extreme that people are like, what the hell are you talking about? And why would anybody need this? We almost did that with strategic Bitcoin reserves. Like we took it to the very edge. But fortunately, we were able to generate the political momentum behind that. And I think, there were, of course, other groups doing that as well. But at the state level, no one was doing it the way we were doing it and got people excited about it and were able to pass it into law. But even still, people are like, well, it's not a good enough strategic Bitcoin reserve. We're like, okay, well, it's just a radical policy, right? Like this is a crazy idea that was able to get across the finish line.
What did you get into law exactly there with the strategic Bitcoin reserves?
So the way that we had to structure it, and this is just feedback we got from lawmakers and the treasurers that we work with, because oftentimes when you're trying to do this type of language, you have to make sure you engage the stakeholders. So the different stakeholders are, the lawmakers, of course. So and here's one thing to keep in mind. When you introduce a bill, you could find a lawmaker and you could introduce whatever the hell you want. Like that's I wouldn't say it's easy. So yeah, it's just helpful context when you're working to try to get a bill passed into law. Like there are the, highly imaginative, bold, hopeful ideas that will radically reshape the course of history. And if you pass it into law, like people will remember you for all of eternity, right? It'll be a big deal. And so there's a lot of ideas around how you can, create a strategic Bitcoin reserve bill. And if you put all your ideas like, oh, we're going to, put half the state's funding into Bitcoin, right? Oh, that'd be great, right? Like you could probably find a lawmaker who would introduce some sort of like radical bill. Like the radical bills are not hard, but they're not easy. They're not hard. They're sort of like, it's in the middle ground, but you'll find some guy, you'll find some state lawmaker who's a maxi, who's a Bitcoiner, who believes, who's willing to fight the fight. But that's what I would call being a martyr in politics. Like you're not really going to pass that bill into law. You're not going to pass a bill into law that says, we're going to put 100% of the state's finances in Bitcoin. Not today. That's not possible. No one's going to do that. You're not going to get consensus from lawmakers, right? And I think consensus is important. We're learning a lot about consensus right now in Bitcoin with the knots versus core debate. But consensus is, it's the same thing in politics. You can get one lawmaker to introduce it. You can get one Bitcoin developer to do a pull request. But going from one to, in the political space, like 51%, or going from one developer to getting all the developers on board and then getting everyone to run the software, even more difficult. So when you craft an idea around what you want to try to get passed into law, you just have to be very careful about what you include in there, because again, going from the one lawmaker to getting 51% of the House, 51% of the Senate, and then getting the governor to sign the bill into law is difficult. And you're not going to find as warm of a reception from all those lawmakers because they don't believe in Bitcoin the way the lawmaker does that you're probably working with to get it introduced. And so it's important to craft it in a way that has the absolute best shot of getting passed into law, but still is like, it's progress. It's a good idea. It gets where you want to go and you can build on it. And one of the big things that we did is in our model policies, we didn't create purchases. We said, okay, we're going to establish the reserve and we're going to empower the treasurer to be able to buy Bitcoin. And people just were so mad. They're like, that's not good enough. That's not enough. And it's like, well, okay, but this is not a finished product. Like it's another famous political quote, like, go for half the loaf and go back for the other half of the loaf later. Like, don't try to get the whole loaf at once because your odds of getting anything is probably zero if you try to go for it all at once. So we just have a very pragmatic political philosophy at Satoshi Action, which has enabled us to score more wins and make more progress. But then we get to build on that progress. We get to turn around the next year and talk to those lawmakers. And now, because of all the wins that we have, we get to go to Washington, D.C. and say, we've passed 9 laws in 8 states. We've done 14 academic papers, 6 of which have been peer reviewed. We've galvanized 250,000 letters to be sent to members all across the country. And lawmakers are like, oh, wow, okay. Like, you're an actual, like, you're in the space. Like, you're a real deal. You're not just someone coming with a bag of cash trying to get your way. You care about the policy. You're thoughtful about the policy. You know how to get policy across the finish line. Okay, let's work together. So that's been really helpful. But yeah, that's just sort of just to put in context why some people get frustrated about, the notches that we achieve. But ultimately, it's you're building a body of work and it gets you closer and closer to the finish line. Another policy that's really common to this problem is people want no capital gains on Bitcoin. Okay, me too. That's great. I'd love to do that. And so the item that's in the Overton window is, let's do a de minimis. Let's do, if you spend $200 or less, then you don't have to pay capital gains. And people are like, that's not good enough. And I'm telling you right now, that is barely even in the Overton window. Like, that is not even, we went to DC and met with a number of different offices and it's a lot more work that needs to be done on this than I think people realize. It's just very complex. Tax policy is extremely complex. And I think that's a problem that we need to fix. We need to probably reform tax policy in the United States and reform how the IRS is structured. But that's a massive uphill battle. And for now, let's just go get the win that we know is possible. It's not going to be an easy win to get a de minimis tax exemption on Bitcoin, but it is in the realm of possibility. I'll finish. I said I'd finish before again, but I'll finish with this one. People say politics is the art of the possible, right? Like, and we always want to strive to be on the very edge of what's possible.
All right, I have so many questions, and like, first of all, from a ATIQ ANCAP person, why would you want states to have strategic Bitcoin reserves? What's the rationale for that? Is it that if they have it, they will have an incentive to be helpful to Bitcoin in the future? And if so, what's the point if it's custodial? Because then it's not really their Bitcoin. It's some guy at Coinbase's Bitcoin, and he can fuck off and buy an island somewhere. So they will just be super more hostile to Bitcoin when that happens. And that will happen. Like I'm in it for the final scene of Fight Club. That's what I'm here for. Like, I'm going to sit there and eat the popcorn while the skyscrapers fall. That's what I'm looking forward to. To me, that's So what's the rationale for strategic Bitcoin reserves, and why would you want your enemies to have that? Like, Bitcoin is for enemies. The state is your enemy. Sure. Why would you want your enemy to have that? That's a long rant, but yeah.
No, it's a great question. And I definitely can appreciate that some people might, raise an eyebrow at it. And for me personally, I view states owning some Bitcoin as a better direction, or is more important, I would say, than necessarily the federal government owning it. I'm supportive of that. I like the federal government potentially owning Bitcoin. I just think it's not as important because the states are experiencing problems today that can be solved with Bitcoin. As an example, as a quick, this is how you'll quickly be able to differentiate the states between the federal government. The states do not have a money printer. States have finite budgets. They have finite resources. And they are directly impacted by inflation, especially because they don't have a way to protect themselves from it the way that individuals do. And that's why we want them to be able to purchase Bitcoin, because then they can protect themselves. And we're not trying to get like, oh, our goal, and this is fine if other people want to do this and push hard on it and make it a thing. But our goal is not to be like, oh, the state is going to be all in Bitcoin. Like, oh, that's all they have, at least not today, right now. Our goal is just to put them in a position to protect themselves from, the runaway monetary printing and the debasement of the dollar. And we actually wrote a paper on this because we thought it was really important to build the intellectual firepower behind the idea. We can go around and write blogs and jump on podcasts and talk all we want about how Bitcoin is great for protecting us from inflation, but nothing cuts through the noise better than really building the intellectual firepower into a very well-crafted academic paper. They may read it, they may not read it, but lawmakers love to know that you did your homework. So we wrote, myself and Dr. Murray, Dr. Murray did 99.9% of the work, and Satoshi Action Education funded it and got behind it. But we put a paper together that showed through empirical data, we looked at the state's finances, we looked at how Bitcoin performed over that time, and we demonstrated that since 2018, the dollar has lost 25% of its purchasing power. And in order to combat that, states could allocate into Bitcoin. And in order to combat 100% of the loss of purchasing power since 2018, they only needed to make a 3% allocation into Bitcoin. And so that was a really powerful tool, that paper, which we condensed into a one-pager, and we shared with everybody, including the treasurers, including the state lawmakers. And they were waving that thing around the Capitol. And we were able to say, this isn't speculation, because that's oftentimes the thing that you'll hear. This isn't speculation. This is prudent management of taxpayer funds. If you want to make sure that you're able to continue funding the schools, and I know you're on the anarcho-capitalist side, so you'd probably love for that all to go away. But if you want to continue if you want to continue funding the schools, continue funding the programs, continue making sure that you don't have to raise taxes to fund those programs, schools.
Don't forget the roads. The roads
are the most, that's the most important one, right? If you want to make sure that you are able to continue doing that and without raising taxes, because if in the current environment, if they don't have access to Bitcoin and everything's getting more expensive, like they have very limited options on what they can do. And, the common option is to raise more taxes. And that's bad for residents. Losing those programs is the other option. They could cut the programs or they could raise taxes. Both of those things are bad for residents, of course, in this current government structural environment that we have. I know there are strong opinions from you and probably your listener base on having a different structure. And so that was a powerful message that we said, if you want to have a tool in your toolbox to protect yourself, just like I protect myself from runaway monetary debasement, then you should allow the treasurer to have access to be able to invest into Bitcoin. And lawmakers, ultimately agreed with that, 51%, plus in New Hampshire. And then we also helped Arizona with their policy. Representative Jeff Winiger, who's actually been the more I look into this guy, he has been just a crazy leader on Bitcoin for so long. He's actually running for mayor now, which is going to be sad for the state, but great for the city. But he has been doing such incredible stuff, including passing protections for nodes. And then ultimately came up with this idea to use the unclaimed property fund as a mechanism to buy Bitcoin and put it into the strategic reserve. And then we also saw Texas, third place, pass theirs into law. They used parts of our model policy, but they went even a step further. They actually allocated resources to it. So that was very encouraging to see. And really a big partly there's a lot of opinions about the lieutenant governor in the state, but ultimately really he made it a priority. He got it across the finish line. And that's why it's a law. And that's why I think it actually has an allocation, because most states did not have a powerful political figure behind their effort. And in Texas, the lieutenant governor is very powerful. They're essentially the Senate president. Most states, the lieutenant governor is it's like the vice president, right? They don't really have power. They sort of have they can kind of walk around and get on the bully pulpit and talk to people, but they don't have actual what you would call hard power in the political process. So I do think it's important for states to have Bitcoin because they can protect themselves. I don't like the idea or the philosophy that we should just let it all burn to the ground. I think we can have a smooth transition to a Bitcoin future. And some people would disagree with me on that, but this is why I have my life. It's one life to live. And I'd much rather live in an environment where we don't go through an apocalypse before we get to the bright orange future. I'd much rather live in I'd much rather the what do they call that? A soft landing, so to speak.
Well, I think everyone agrees on the soft landing point. It's just that we disagree on what that looks like. To me, Bitcoin is the soft landing. Like the bigger the Bitcoin economy is between individuals, the less coercion and violence there is. So that is the soft landing. That is removing the violence from the equation. And I don't think you necessarily need to break eggs to make that omelette. I think that's those eggs are in the Bitcoins. But the thing I can't wrap my head around American politics and the Constitution is like I think you're so far from the Constitution if self-custody is like it should be protected by the First Amendment, right? Because like to me, not your keys, not your coins still applies. It was never any other way. Custodial Bitcoin is paper Bitcoin, is not really Bitcoin. It means some other guy has it, actually controls it. In fact, I think I'd love to pick your brain on this because this goes deep. So ownership is your relationship with an object in a legal sense, right? So if you can own your house, but someone else can live in it. You still own it, but someone else is in possession of it. That's the difference between ownership and possession. You can own a car, but someone can steal it and drive around in it, and then they possess the car, but you own it. So there's a difference between ownership and possession. Which category does Bitcoin fall into?
It's difficult. You know, you can find some lawmakers. There's definitely some state lawmakers that I know of, maybe one or two federal lawmakers, where if you were to go down that rabbit trail, like people would be able to follow you there. But the vast majority of state lawmakers and really federal lawmakers, if you try to go that direction, like they're going to be like, what the hell are you talking about? Like you sound like a crazy person. And that's sort of the battle of like something that we deal with in the space is that this is such a radically new approach. Like we're reshaping completely the way that money is designed and possessed, like you said, and controlled and managed, that it makes it difficult because you have to communicate in a way where you want them to do the right thing. You want them to go the right direction. But if you take the time to educate them to the extent that they really truly understand it, oftentimes you can end up in a situation where they might not even be in office anymore, right? Like
because
you know what I mean? Like it's like taking like
busy stacking instead.
yeah. Like they're going to be so focused on Bitcoin now, they're not even going to be able to like get reelected. They're like spending too much time with you, like, and that's a problem I've had lawmakers tell me too. They're like, listen, I can't spend all my time focused on this because I have other priorities or I have other issues that I've like built my career around, right? And so
at the airport, I don't know I think that it's the case in the US that you can only fly with $10,000 in cash. Anything else needs to go through the customs. Like you need to declare anything.
It's something like that.
And it's a number that has.
I don't think it's a legal requirement. I think they are allowed to technically like interrogate you, and then like if it's over a certain amount, and then they can like kind of sort of make a determination. I can't remember the exact rules around it, but it's something. But anyways, to your point, there is some rules around that.
So my question around that is like, first of all, I know that number 10,000 has not been updated since the 70s.
Yeah,
which is just. That's another thing inflation does. It makes all the rules harder for people to follow because it just fucks everyone. Because it's mass theft. That's what it is. Like stealing from everyone. Of course, it makes everyone's life harder. But are lawmakers aware that particular rule is now completely redundant since you can just memorize 12 words? Like, are they aware that is impossible to stop now?
Yeah, there's definitely some lawmakers that are aware of that, but usually it's from a skeptical sort of concerned, like, hey, this stuff is, you can move it anywhere you want and people can just bypass all of our current systems. Like,
yeah, and the urge for them, I would believe, is like, therefore we need to regulate more. Not how awesome this is.
A lot of them. Well, because if you think about it through the lens of like, we live in like a very paternalistic society where like we protect people, we take care of them. We just don't, like a lot of people really depend on the state. They depend on leadership from the state. They depend on lawmakers to write laws and create systems to protect them. And that's really the political culture. I mean, and not even just the United States, I'd say in like most of like Western society.
No, tell me about it. Like, I live in the EU.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. Like everything.
It's very much.
We can't even unscrew our own the bottle caps from our sodas.
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah. You guys have the attached bottle caps. That's right. It's so funny. I know. It's like, is this really what we're spending our time on? Like, I like it. Actually, I kind of like coming there, and I'm like, I never lose my bottle cap now. So, but anyways, we can come back to the bottle caps another time. So, because we're just in this like multi-decade long experiment of being, hyper paternalistic in the way that we manage our government, and thus the government managing the people, there is a lot of politicians who are built up and praised and moving into high-ranking, positions because they're very good at, being paternalistic and protecting consumers and making sure that people are not taken advantage of, and making sure that, terrorist organizations aren't going to get funded, and making sure that criminals can't participate in nefarious activity, and that we really protect people from those types of people. And so there's a big concern that Bitcoin and really digital assets writ large can circumnavigate these paternalistic systems that have been created, and those lawmakers who have, come through the ranks as someone who is someone who cares about people and wants to take care of them, like they're going to have a problem with that. And so it's less of like, I hate this thing because I think that it's bad. It's more like, I think the deep part of it is they really, part of them really does care. Some of them pretend to care, like they're faking it. But let's just assume, let's not assume motive here, but like a lot of lawmakers do sort of have like a North Star, even the ones that you hate the most. I won't name any names, but like anybody listening, including yourself, think of a lawmaker you absolutely hate. Like I guarantee you, like they have something like that is like their North Star that like really got them into politics, really made them get engaged and care. And oftentimes,
I don't doubt that at all. I don't doubt that at all.
And absolute power corrupts, absolutely. So maybe they lose their way, but they still usually there remains some fragment of that North Star in the way that they think and in the way that they operate. And they want to keep seeing this paternalistic system continue to function because they want to keep seeing people be protected. Like that's how they feel in internal to themselves. So I do think that you'll continue to see lawmakers try to restrict the ability for, people to freely, openly access Bitcoin. Hopefully that time will eventually come to an end. But I think, I'll just leave it there, that I think that's a big part of why we see this response from lawmakers. And a lot of us are like, why are you coming after my freedom? And they're like, well, I'm just trying to take care of people, which ultimately I think the system we're in is too paternalistic, but that's, up for another debate.
Yeah, I think that's why many Bitcoiners tend to focus on like laws around encryption and privacy and stuff, and like being really adamant against these backdoor thingies that they're forcing big Apple and Google to implement on their devices. Like and I really think personally that that's the correct fight to take, because if we have strong encryption, we can bypass whatever we want to bypass, basically. But that's the ANCAP point of view, I guess. So back to the Constitution. Do you think, like, to which extent is America actually following the Constitution, given the fact that Bitcoin is apparently not protected by the First Amendment, which it should be since it's just information?
I think it would be. We haven't really seen a Supreme Court decision be made around any relevant issues with regards to Bitcoin. And hopefully we, get a good Supreme Court when the case goes there. I mean, the Supreme Court has been highly politicized over the last decade. Really, maybe last couple decades. I mean, it's always been politicized. I should say that it's not a recent thing. It's just been going to the extreme recently, as far as, and I'm not saying the viewpoints of the specific Supreme Court. I don't want to cast my political opinion on the current makeup. I just mean that it seems more regularly that there are big attempts to shift the makeup of the Supreme Court in a number of different ways in my lifetime. And I do believe that freedom of speech does protect big chunks of the Bitcoin space. There are lawmakers on both sides of the aisle that agree with that. I mean, I was just talking to a very strong U.S. Senate office recently, and they definitely believe that, code is speech, and they're Democrats. And of course, I've met Republicans that think the same. But I think probably the big difference between Republicans and Democrats is like Democrats are more paternalistic and like Republicans are not. And that's probably why Bitcoin is more of a natural fit oftentimes for them. My goal is, of course, long-term to get Democrats to see how Bitcoin is very good for financial inclusion and for access, which are, caretaking, paternalistic ways of approaching the technology, and are true. They're absolutely true. Also, the ability for people to participate by running a node is very much of an inclusion component. Like, we don't have money today, predating Bitcoin. We don't have a money system that people can, essentially like participate in the direction of it. Like even our own United States system, the Federal Reserve is separate from the government. It's like its own independent agency. We don't get a vote on it. So like one guy wakes up and is like, this is what the inflation, this is what like the rate of inflation is. Like, this is like how much money we're going to print. I know it's much more complex than that, of course, but that, just to boil it down into simplistic terms. And so now you have this system where people can actually participate, and, one node doesn't matter, but a lot of nodes together matter, just like how one vote doesn't matter, but a lot of votes together matter when it comes to outcomes. So I really think that there's an opportunity in the future. It's like we just need more people pounding the table on this about how Bitcoin is in alignment with a lot of views that progressives hold. They just will achieve those values. They will achieve their objectives through a different means. And because right now the means is government. And like, we're going to do what we believe is right through the government. And they've been doing that, successfully for decades. And I would hope that they can see that Bitcoin is a powerful tool for achieving those objectives. At bare minimum, the difference between a Bitcoin world and the current system is you don't need minimum balances. There's no credit checks. You can't be discriminated against. Doesn't matter what your age, sex, sexual orientation is, gender, or even immigration status. Like, if you're wanting to help immigrants, like, here you go. Here's a money system that you literally can't stop people from using that are immigrants, whether they're legal or illegal. Like, that's kind of my point. And not only can they participate economically, like buy, sell, trade, transact peer-to-peer, mine, they can run a node, and they can actually participate in the direction of Bitcoin, which the more people that participate in the direction of Bitcoin, the better it will be at reflecting the values of the planet, instead of like, an elite few, which is where a lot of the other digital asset technologies go. Crypto projects tend to have very few people that can participate in the direction. And that's what makes them very dissimilar from the current system.
Great news. The Bitcoin Infinity Show has a new lead sponsor. This is BitVault, a new multi-sig wallet that lets you not only put Bitcoins into cold storage, but into super duper polar bear meat in your freezer type cold storage using the time lock function. This protects against $15 wrench attacks because the attacker doesn't know that you have this thing running in the background. So you can just secretly take back your Bitcoins while the attacker thinks he got it, sort of. So go to bitvault.sv to find out more. You can use code Infinity for a 10% discount. They have a pre-sale here that's still in beta, but you can get a lifetime deal for $199. This is 100% open source, 100% non-custodial, and there's zero counterparty risk. So what are you waiting for? Check out bitvault.sv right now. And speaking of private keys, you should, of course, take control of your private keys. And you do that by getting yourself a good old hardware wallet. And our favorite is the Bitbox. And they have a new edition called the Bitbox O2 Nova. The Bitbox O2 Nova has a tempered glass display, which is new and shiny. It has next level security because they have the latest security chip installed. And now it works directly with iOS. So you can plug it into your iPhone or your iPad directly, and it will work perfectly for you. It works on all other devices as well, Windows, Linux, Commodore 64, whatever. So go to bitbox.swiss and get a Nova right now. Use code Infinity for 5% off. And if all this responsibility sounds a little too much for you, we have a perfect service to recommend, and that is the bitcoinadvisor.com. These are nice fellows from down under, and they can help you with Bitcoin inheritance planning. It's a collaborative custody solution where you're still 100% in control. Go to thebitcoinadvisor.com to check them out. And I think you can use Code Infinity there too. All right, back to the show. Yeah, it's the rules without rulers thing, right? Direction. I mean, I view it as not only direction, but protecting it from having a certain direction sometimes, like when it's the wrong direction, because we get that's sort of how I view what's going on now. Like core version 30 is like, don't install it, guys. Like, give this some time. And even if you're not a NOTs person, you should definitely not upgrade to that, because that's a change that may or may not come with some real serious issues. So let's go into the whole NOTs versus core debate. You've been a NOTs proponent on X for a while now. What's your stance? What's your take? How existential do you think this threat is?
So I've been publicly supporting NOTs since June. I initially tweeted about NOTs in May. I put out a tweet and I said, to the effect, like, glad to see this debate happening here on social platforms, because the last time there was a really big debate of this size, it was during the block size wars. And the reason I was ultimately able to come to a conclusion on, how I felt about it was because I saw the public debate and I was able to read and see with my own eyes and make my own decisions. And I ultimately decided that it was critical to defend decentralization and the ability to run a node. And that's why I very much was a small blocker. And I have always carried that value forward. I talked a little bit earlier about how important it is for people to have access to nodes, because that's the difference really between current systems and Bitcoin, even crypto systems and Bitcoin, is really the ability for the average person, someone who doesn't have a lot of money, someone who isn't rich, they're not wealthy, to be able to participate in the direction of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a global project and it's not just for the millionaires and the billionaires, it's for everyone. In fact, it's probably more important for people who have been marginalized or disenfranchised or left behind, or, not given the access to financial tools and opportunities that the ultra wealthy have access to. So I'm glad millionaires and billionaires are buying it, but like, that's not like why I'm here. I'm not like yeeted about like the next billionaire, like buying Bitcoin. Like it's fun to see, but I'd much rather see a lot more people be buying it, individuals buying it. And then of course, really importantly, running a node. And to me, running a node and protecting the ability to run a node is arguably the most important thing to protect in Bitcoin. I think there are two major priorities that we need to see in Bitcoin, two things that we need to see change. One is we need to make it way, way easier to run a node, extremely easy. Like, it should be trivial to run a node. And then I also want to see the decentralization of mining be fixed. Like, it's way too centralized right now. Like, but it's number one and it's number two. And for a long time, I viewed the centralization of mining as a problem, a very big problem. And I have been very supportive of what Ocean is doing on that front. And I'm very supportive of like what, Jack Dorsey has been pushing for in the past with trying to decentralize mining. But it's, to me, this recent change from Core 30, and there's so many facets to it, which have been consistently debated online. So I'll try to get into as much of it as I can. But you have this attempted change, which was, the op-return, changing the op-return from, 80 bytes to 100,000 bytes. This is a change that has been attempted multiple times in Bitcoin and has been rejected multiple times in Bitcoin. And the difference between, though, also this change, I think, and what I think was also really alarming about it to me, I don't know if this part was attempted in the past, but one of the things that was extremely alarming to me was not only changing the default to a really high number, because right now the default is 80, it's mempool policy. And I should probably start with trying to speak very simply too, because I know some people have asked me like, hey, can you just make this like super, super simple? There's different rules in Bitcoin. You have consensus rules and you have policy rules. Consensus rules are like the Constitution. They're unbreakable, or like you shouldn't break them, right? Like in the US Constitution, you're not supposed to break them. You're not supposed to be allowed to. In Bitcoin, they're definitely unbreakable. Like that's the cool thing about them. And when you make a consensus change, like that requires a hard fork. So you're actually like creating a new version of Bitcoin. And you could get everyone to agree, and maybe they'll all migrate to the new version of Bitcoin. And there's been hard forks in the very early days of Bitcoin. So it's not like insane, but it would be a very big deal. Like it would be like having a constitutional convention in the United States. Like, first of all, like even having one is a big deal. And then actually like getting something to be ratified is an even bigger deal, because you just need so much consensus. You need so many states on board. Or if you go there's multiple pathways, but you need the states to ratify that potential amendment to the Constitution. And then it becomes very hard to get rid of it. It's like virtually impossible to get rid of it. So the same thing is true with Bitcoin. Like if you want to do a consensus change, it takes a lot of work. You got to get all the developers on board. Then you got to get all the miners on board. Then you got to get all the users on board, the node runners on board. There are ways to sort of like, some of those political powers could like battle back and forth with each other to like push the other one aside. Also what matters is like where people are placing their economic energy. So if, as an example, when Bitcoin Cash hard forked during the block size wars, one of the strongest indicators that it was failing was like the price was going down comparative to Bitcoin. That was like a very strong indicator. So that's consensus. And I'm not a technical expert, so I may have said some things a little bit wrong, and I apologize. I'm just trying to give a generalistic picture of what this looks like. And then
if I may, I think this is, speaking of the block size wars, I'd just like to add on that. I think we're on the same page here, that the reason that we were so convinced about Bitcoin's success was after the block size wars.
Yeah.
Because that event showed that the nodes were in charge, and not the miners, not the big companies, not the big money. That's when I saw, holy shit, this is different than all the other shit out there. This is so fucking good. And I think I speak for you too. Would that be correct?
That's correct. I don't think I said it strongly enough. You're right. And this is something I've said before, and it's actually something that Saylor said too, right? Of why he ultimately decided to really be into Bitcoin is because he said the cyber hornets showed up and were like, no, this is what we're going to do. Yeah, there was a big economic push. Like there was all these big miners, the big companies in the space got together and they're like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to switch it. We're going to change the bandwidth because we need more bandwidth. It's good for Bitcoin, yada, yada, yada. And ultimately, the users stood their ground and were like, no, we're not going to make this change. Like why would I do something that's not good for me? I think is the big thing. And that should be always how we look through Bitcoin, through the lens of like, what's good for the users? And sometimes we see changes, small changes, that ultimately are good for miners, or that are ultimately good for developers, or they're good for like other parts of the space that don't have anything to do with node runners. But at the end of the day, I believe, and I hope that this continues on because it's at risk. I believe that the node runners, that's where like the buck stops. Like that is the ultimate political power. Is they sort of have, some people have called it like the nuclear bomb. Like they're the ones that really are the only ones that can like be like, nope, like this is over now. We're going to do the nuclear bomb.
They have veto. You can veto.
Yeah, they have but it's collective power too. So like it's not like they can just say like, one node runner cannot veto. You need mass collective node running consensus where everyone is like, F this, we're doing this over here. And so that's what makes it difficult to activate as well. Like it's why you don't see it happen very often. And it's also why it's also something that people should appreciate about Bitcoin. Just going back to your point about how this is different because, and this is what you woke up and said, wow, this is so different because people are able to participate and decide that this is what we're going to do. But okay, so that's consensus. Then you have policy, particularly in this case, mempool policy. I would akin mempool policy to like all the laws that don't have nothing to do with the Constitution of the United States. Like Constitution is over here. As long as you don't mess with it, as long as you don't contradict it, you can do whatever the hell you want with these other laws. And that's what we're seeing in the avenue of mempool policy. Like your mempool policy, essentially you have, your memory and in your node, it has all the pending transactions while they're waiting to be processed. They're sitting there, they're across all the different nodes across the entire network. And there are different little like tweaks and tools that you can use to adjust how your mempool operates and functions. And those tweaks, those ability to tweak those things is completely within the power of the individual node runner. And the tweak in question is around op return and the size of op return. Op return for a long time it's been around since I think 2013, 2014, if I remember correctly. It was introduced, and it was introduced as a way for people to just put a little tiny bit of extra data at the end of a transaction. Very small. Started off like 40 bytes, then it went to like 80 bytes, and now I think it's like theoretically 83 bytes. I don't know how they come to that calculation, but I keep you might know better than me.
Yeah, I heard the explanation for the 3 bytes are just to verify the other 80 bytes. So it's sort of like the first one and like 0 in a binary, like it's like an ASCII message. Like anyway.
So was 40, then it was 80, theoretically 83. We'll just say 80 just to keep things simple for the rest of the conversation. In the early days, there was a very strong attempt to increase it even further. And a lot of the people that were pushing for this change ultimately failed. But I think the most noteworthy of those people was Vitalik Buterin pushing to change it and pushing to increase it. And in fact, when he left to build Ethereum, he cited the lack of ability to be able to increase that, the fact that core devs were so, at the time, vigilant in defending that space. He literally tweets it out and says, like, the reason I'm leaving and like this inability to increase this cap is like the nail in the coffin. Like, there's just no way we can build Ethereum on Bitcoin. He literally says, there's no way we can build ETH on BTC because of this issue. So it's clearly like been attempted to be changed before in the past. And then like, we'll circle back to some of this a lot but let's just travel through history. Then you go forward to, 2023? When they try to change it again. And there's again a big fight, big battle, big back and forth. But again, squashed, doesn't get increased. And then you transport to 2025, and all of a sudden, you have core developers who are very interested in making this change. There's certainly some that push back, including Luke Dasher, I should say, not like Douche Dash Jr. I learned that a lot recently because of his people keep saying it that way. So I was like, oh, I'm clearly saying it wrong this whole time. So him and others push back and are against it, and it ultimately gets merged. Now we can talk about the technical components of why this change is being pushed, and also why people are against it. I think, in my opinion, personally, the core reason why I'm against it is because, and not Bitcoin core, but like my centering pillar of why I'm against it is because I don't want Bitcoin to become Ethereum. I don't think Bitcoin needs to become Ethereum. I don't think Bitcoin needs to compete with other chains. I think Bitcoin should do what it does best. It should stay focused on being a money and a payment system. And if I'm not like someone who's like, how dare you build on Bitcoin? Like, I don't live in this mentality like nothing should ever touch Bitcoin but a monetary transaction. I know some people go that far, and I appreciate that viewpoint. I think there will be some things that are tied to Bitcoin, but it should always be done through the lens of like, okay, this is the system that we have for Bitcoin, and it should be the system for node users and runners and people who actually care about Bitcoin and want to use Bitcoin for its original intent, which is a money and a payment system. If someone like is able to efficiently and effectively utilize parts of Bitcoin that don't damage the ability for people to participate, that don't bloat the blockchain, that don't cause inefficiency problems, that don't cause UTXO bloat, like, fine, like go ahead. Like, I'm not going to like wage a holy war against that person because they found a creative engineering solution to tie their project to Bitcoin in some way, whether that, and I'm not an expert on these things, but whether that be side chains, whether that even be somewhat what the crypto projects are doing, where they're using the proof of work on Bitcoin to like be their security model, but it doesn't like add anything to Bitcoin. So, or it's like very minimal, or like the voting stuff that people have done, which I thought was really interesting, where it's like radically efficient. That stuff doesn't get me up out of bed at night and make me get pissed. What makes me get pissed is when there are self-interested, self-dealing, self-enriching tactics to use Bitcoin in a way that will enrich the people that are utilizing it and will hurt the people that actually are there for its core intent. So if your project, and it could be whatever, I don't care. Sure, it could be a JPEG, even though I think that that's ridiculous to put JPEGs on Bitcoin. if your JPEG is like using just fractions of a tiny, tiny little bit of Bitcoin's resources, I'm not going to be pissed about that. I'm not going to like it, but I'm not going to be pissed. What I'm going to get pissed about is when you cause UTXO bloat, which has exploded over the last 4 years. What I'm going to get pissed about is when you try to raise 80 bytes to 100,000 bytes. It's a 1,250x increase in the size of the op return. And then you create this avenue for people like Vitalik and others who have always wanted to turn Bitcoin into Ethereum to be able to do that. Because not to cast shade, like go build Ethereum. Great, go do it. Like I'm not a toxic maxi. Like I don't have any Ethereum. I'm not interested in Ethereum. I'm not interested in a lot of these crypto projects, but I'm not like, oh man, we really need to like kill these people off, like crush these other groups. I used to kind of be like that in my early days, but I'm a reformed maxi, I guess you could call it. I'm a reformed Bitcoiner. I'm Bitcoin only. It's the only thing I own. But go build it. Go ahead. Go trial and error it. And someday you guys are going to figure something out and something will come out of it, right? Like maybe it's stable coins. I don't know. Those seem to be taking off. But I don't want it built on Bitcoin because if you do that, it's going to shatter the core intent and purpose of the technology, which is to be a money that no one can mess with. And it's a money that represents the people. It's money for the people, by the people. And if you bloat the blockchain, if you damage UTXO bloat and you cause the amount of data that's going through my node to radically increase, you are going to make it harder and harder and harder for me to run a node and for others to run a node. And it's already very difficult for people in developing countries to run a node. I mean, like we've gone from, hey, here's $50, $100 to run a node to now it's $300 to $500 for like the bare minimum setup. And if you continue to, and we haven't barely even scratched the surface of expanding the size of the Bitcoin ledger. If you start to blow open the op return and you start to blow open UTXO bloat, then you'll end up in a scenario where it's $1,000 to run a node. It's $5,000 to run a node. It's $10,000 to run a node, and you need a fiber connection because it takes so much time to download it. You go from it being 1 week to do an initial block download, which for those that aren't familiar, when you first get your node, you have to do an IBD, initial block download. You download the entire ledger. Doesn't matter. You know, people will, oh, you can do a prune node, yada. You still have to, when you do the IBD, you have to take it all in. And for some people that takes days if they have very powerful hardware and software. Some people that takes weeks if they have mediocre, and some people even longer. And the more and more and more stuff you put on Bitcoin, the longer that time gets. So not only are you increasing the amount of money it'll take to run a node, you're increasing the amount of time it will take to get the node up and going, which is also damages the ability for people to participate as a node runner. And so I'll pause on this part right here because I think I've said a lot. But the big thing for me is I'm a node runner from 2017 to now, and I'm being told I have to do something with my node that I don't want to do. And I think that is bad for Bitcoin and will damage the ability for future people to participate in running a node, which is also bad for Bitcoin. And so that's why I am very strongly against setting the default to 100,000 bytes. And then I think the one thing that I left out is deprecating the default, getting rid of the ability for people to change it is really like the thing that's like, oh, you want to go there? So not only are you going to say, let's set the default to 100,000 on all the nodes when they download the software, 95% of people will never change that. They're also going to turn around soon in a future update and say, we are going to take away your ability to control how much data is put into the op return. So, okay, I said I was going to pause. I'll stop there and hopefully something somewhat came through.
No, I love it. I mean, it's a great perspective, and it's very close to what I think about it. Yeah, there's the latest concern is that really nasty stuff can be put into these 100 kilobyte op returns. Really nasty stuff has always been, people have always been able to put really nasty stuff in Bitcoin, but it's very obfuscated when it's like in the other transactional data. But when it's in an op return, it's kind of obvious what it is. So some people now view that as an attack vector because all of a sudden, all the nodes that run on Amazon web server, like do not run your node on Amazon web server, by the way, but a whole bunch of nodes will be shut down as soon as one of these files is added to the blockchain and stuff. Do you believe that is an existential threat to Bitcoin, or will it somehow survive it? And if so, how?
I think more analysis needs to be done. I am hesitant to throw out my, like, here's my opinion on it, because I think this is a very important question, and we need to get to the bottom of whether or not, of how accurate it is. I tend to lean towards the side of that this is a very big problem, and this will create I think it will not only create an avenue for like regulatory backlash, but also like social backlash on people. I think it's very dangerous, even if there's no real legal liability. Because the question is there legal liability is the big part, right? Like, are you actually going to be in trouble from law enforcement if someone comes into your house and you have a bunch of nasty stuff on your node, which I think in the mempool versus on a blockchain will also be a legal liability difference. And then there's another question around like the social backlash. Like even if there's no legal liability, like news outlets will pick up on the story because it will inevitably happen. Like, and we know that it will happen because it already happened to BSV. The moment they expanded their op return from a lower number, I don't know the exact number that it was at. I think it was also 80 bytes, but they expanded it exactly to 100,000 bytes. Like that's the exact proposal that is being pushed through right now.
Yeah.
Like we saw illegal and disgusting content make it onto BSV's network. So we know that this could happen. So it's not like we're like out here in La La Land, like, oh my gosh, like watch out, like this could happen. Like it has happened. It probably will happen. So there's the question of legal liability, but then there's the problem of like, even if you're not legally in trouble, like, are you really going to want to like turn around and keep promoting Bitcoin to your friends when they're like, you know, I don't want to say the words because I think that's a problem for like algorithms and stuff. And I also don't even want to talk about it, but some of the disgusting stuff, people know, people know how dark and disgusting this world can be. And people know how evil and how some people just want to disrupt. Like there are people in this world that they're just nasty people and they want to disrupt stuff. So they will take the nasty content and they will put it on Bitcoin because they want to disrupt things. And who knows, maybe some 3-letter agency will just do it for them because they want to disrupt Bitcoin as well. So, and I don't want to get too conspiracy theory with this stuff. Like I'm just saying, like there is a very high probability we'll make it on chain. And once the news stories start coming out, like everyone is going to not really want to talk about Bitcoin for a while, like to their friends. Like it's going to go dark, and then running a node is going to go dark. And so adoption is going to be hit. And it's, at the end of the day, it's like, I think the important thing to go back to here is what's so important about this change? Like, why is it so important that we cram this change through with all the concerns that are going on and with all the community backlash that's going on? And oftentimes what I hear, there's like a variety of reasons what people throw out, but one of them is harm reduction. That's literally what they say. Like, they want people that are currently bloating the UTXOs with JPEGs and other things to use the op return. So they said, okay, here's this giant trash can that you could put your stuff in, but it won't work because there's no incentive to use it, because over 143 bytes, like the way these transactions are structured, once you get to 143 bytes, it becomes economically unviable to use op return because using UTXOs via the witness discount becomes cheaper. But there's like an initial cost to doing it through the UTXO process and using the witness discount. And that's roughly at about 143 bytes when it starts to break even and go back the other direction.
The analogy I have for it is like your mailbox is suddenly filled with advertisement. And because you don't like the advertisement, because it's just advertisement for dick pics, you install a giant trash can outside and you tell the mailman or you tell every company that are giving you these ads that, can you please put this directly into the garbage bin instead so I can throw them away more easily? They're not going to do that. Like, no, that's not how it works.
No, but I was just going to say there's an economic interest in getting this stuff into the place that they want it to be in. And like people keep ignoring that. Oh, well, we created a space for them. Well, they're not going to use it.
No,
they don't want to use it. They said that. Even Udi and all the guys, and I don't want to, I'm not trying to like hate on those guys too much here. It's just, I just want to be clear though, when they were talking about doing this change, Udi specifically and others jumped into the chat on like I think it was the IRC or one of the other dev mailing lists and said, we will not use this. But they said, we will come up with ways to use it. So that's the dangerous part here is you have UTXO bloat, big problem, which I think really started to continue to happen because there wasn't a fix that was put in. Luke Dasher suggested a fix. They didn't agree to do it and they let it just ride. And now we have all this UTXO bloat because I think of lack of leadership at core. And so now they're saying like, well, let's put it into the op return, but they're not going to do it. And ultimately what's going to happen is you're going to have the same amount of UTXO bloat that you did before. That's not going to change at all. But people are going to come up with new things to put into the op return, which means, and I keep going back with these core devs or people that are like core experts or whatever you want to call them. And I'm just like, you're calling it harm reduction, which means that inherently there is still harm. Like you're not getting rid of the harm by putting it in there. You just believe that it will be less harmful. And I agree that it would be if they actually did it, but they're not going to do it because they have an economic interest in continuing to put it through because of the witness discount, continue to exploit UTXOs. So, and I love that you brought up the spam because people, spam is always like, people trying to, phish you or do bad stuff. I'm like, no, it's not. It's almost always advertising. It's always like, buy my product. But I continue to see people spout that like it's just some truth and go look at your spam box right now. Like how much of it is people trying to phish you and how much of it is people just trying to sell you something? I guarantee you it's probably 90-1 people trying to sell you something.
And empiricism has no place in economics to begin with. Like they can do all this, they can do testnet stuff and see if stuff works. They can do empirical this and empirical that. None of that is telling you anything about what's actually going to happen because the market is always dynamic and and testnet is not mainnet. Like you don't know. Bitcoin has actual enemies and quite a few of them. So no, The question I never see answered properly from that side is how does this help Bitcoin as money? Like how does this make Bitcoin become better money? Why is this important? Like I never see that. And there's never like and why 100 kilobytes? Like why 100,000 kilobytes? Like or why not just stick to the 80 or double the 80 if you want. Yeah.
This is what I've said. I said, okay, so they said, first of all, there's no, we got to bring this point up again. These op return transactions are unviable over 143 bytes.
Yeah.
So why not set the limit to 150 or 160? Because they're not going to use it over that number anyways.
Or 143.
Right. And so that was one of my questions. They don't really have an answer for that. The other big argument is around the intent of this. And I asked, based on a podcast I saw. So Antoine, who's one of the core dev who actually pushed for this change the most.
Yeah.
He goes on to some show and he's talking about how we need to future-proof Bitcoin and we need to have more use cases. And if Bitcoin doesn't grow and change, that it's going to become irrelevant. And I'm like, dude, you like what? Like you're a core dev and you're saying these words?
That's
like, that's crazy
talk.
to me.
It's shitcoiner talk. Use cases is useless. Any other use case than the monetary use case is an abuse case. That's it.
But again, I'm circling back to even like I don't mind if someone finds some radically efficient way to utilize Bitcoin's stack to do something, that's fine. But at the point where you're saying we want to blow open op return from 80 to 100,000 bytes, like a 1,250x increase for use cases like that we don't know of, can't point to anyone. And when we say, well, you're just doing this for Satria, no, it's not just for Satria. You're like, okay, well then what is it for? Well, it's for use cases, for future use cases. Like, well, what ones? We don't know yet, right? Well, that's the problem here too. Is like when you talk about policy, and this is where like my world of policy in the real world and policy in the digital world are starting to sort of seemingly blend together because I'm noticing a lot of the same parallels. But when you do policy in the government world, if you come to a lawmaker and you're like, I want to build I want to build a trash can that is as big as a pool. Why? That's what the lawmaker's going to say. Why would you want to do that? Well, my theory is that if we build this big trash can, like people will, instead of throwing their trash on the streets, like they'll throw it into this trash can. You're like, well, we don't really need that. Like we already have like small trash cans and people have trash cans in their homes and like we have a, waste dispensing system, but it'd be better if it was all in one place. You're like, lawmakers just like, no, we don't need like that's, and you could extrapolate this to any idea. I tried to come up with an idea that's like somewhat similar in context, but like think of any idea. If you come to a lawmaker with an idea that isn't needed, nobody's asking for, there's no demand for it, you don't know what you're going to use it for, the lawmaker is going to say, this is a solution in search of a problem. And that's not what we do in policy. We don't just pass laws for the sake of passing laws. Like we get asked this question all the time when we try to pass Bitcoin rights. When we try to pass the right to self-custody, like the first thing they say is like, well, is someone actually trying to like take away your right to self-custody? And we're like, yeah, yes, they are. Like we have seen this happen actively. Oh, okay. Well, it makes sense to me. Let's do it. Like that, like that's how the conversation goes. So it's strange to me that like I'm going to these, policymakers in Bitcoin, these core devs, they are the ones that write the policy and they're the ones that write the code that ultimately gets merged into core and into Bitcoin. And they're the ones telling me that they have an idea that doesn't have anything to back it up or like any reason for it to occur. Now, of course, there's been a lot of shifting of the goalposts. Like they come up with other ideas. Like people are like, well, it helps with block propagation and it helps with mining centralization. What they're talking about there is slipstream. They don't like slip. For some reason, there is a group of core devs and their funders who have decided that they woke up one day and they're like, we think slipstream is like ruining Bitcoin and that we need to get rid of it. Like it is like the thing that we need to destroy. I don't like slipstream. I think that having private mempools and the ability to circumnavigate node limits on mempool policy is a problem. I do think that there is a little more revenue that goes to the company who has created Slipstream because of this. And so like the argument is like, well, if they're getting more money, they can outcompete people and like they're going to be, mining is going to centralize even more. I just really don't buy into that theory. Like even at the height of the problem, it was 0.02% of transactions that were utilizing this approach. And it has significantly dropped off since then. Even Steve Lee from Spiral, who has been one of the big people saying, this is why we need to do this. He was on a podcast talking about the need to do it. And the guy was like, he's like, oh, we got to fix this. Steve Lee's like, we got to fix this problem. It's a big problem. And the host was like, oh, tell me about how much growth we've seen in the space. Like how many transactions have really become, must be a big number. Well, it's only 0.2% and the number's fallen off. And so it's not really an emergency. And it's like, okay, well then going back to again, like why are we making these changes that are getting node runners absolutely livid? We're seeing like a first time in history, like actual migration away from core. I mean, I know there's been other battles, but nothing has been like this. You're seeing huge division. You're seeing the community like literally break apart. And you're telling me that like this is for a trivial amount of transactions or like a trivial amount of improvement to like block propagation. Like it's just not worth the fight. And so that's all. I'll stop there. I know you probably have something to add, but there's all these reasons and it's like, they're not really reasons though. Like none of this is a good reason.
No, exactly. And like first, my take on the whole other use cases thing is that, yeah, I agree with you that as long as they don't fuck up Bitcoin as money, then I'm okay with them. But
No
I think I have a harder stance on what that means because I know that can't be quantified. Like as soon as some other use case is on there, then you mess with some incentive some way, like butterfly effect stuff. And I would like Bitcoin to be as clean as absolutely possible from all this shit, because just as a house is real estate is worse as housing for human beings because it is being used as a store of value. And similarly, Bitcoin will be worse as money if it's used as fucking dick pic JPEG storage. Like there's no way around that. And even if it's used for election data or whatever the other stuff is, I know open timestamps is the one I can agree to because it's so small, the impact on the chain and stuff that has such a minimal impact that you can't really argue against it. Okay, but otherwise I think we should be adamant against all forms of spam. But what I wanted to do before we wrap this thing up is like I'd like to, and I love that you brought it back to politics, by the way. I'd like to try to devil's advocate a thing. So if Core V30 is if nodes start to upgrade to that, and we have this policy change to 100,000, I'm losing my brain here. Is 100 kilobytes, 100,000 bytes? Yeah, exactly. And nasty stuff is relayed around the network. Do you think a single miner would actually mine a block with that shit in it? Because of like isn't the incentive, even if mining is centralized, isn't the incentive for the miner to not mine that particular transaction high enough because they know that this would be an actual threat to Bitcoin? I mean, they have no revenue anymore if Bitcoin goes to shit. Like, no miner has an incentive to put let's call it nasty shit on chain. And is that incentive strong enough is really the question.
So I'm sure there's a very large chunk of miners who would not, but just keep in mind there are miners all over the world who probably don't share your concern or your principles or your values. And all it takes is one miner. I mean, we've seen, solo miners with literally a tiny little,
Yeah, I don't think they're the problem. I think Mara is the problem. But that's just my
Mara
opinion.
would not. Yeah, Mara. I think the argument is that Mara would not allow that to be done through Slipstream.
Well, they allowed a lot of other fucking bloaty shit,
but not the illegal stuff. There would be no way they would get in huge trouble for that. So
yeah, they even tried to follow the ESG stuff, right?
Back. They did the OFAC stuff back in the day. That was before current leadership, and the current leadership shut that down due to community backlash. So, community backlash matters and is important. Lo and behold, we should actually get up and do something about things that we don't like. And people are mad about that. And I know some people are upset. Some people are upset. Some people are mad. They just want to believe in core. They don't like this idea that core as an institution is being challenged because they've revered them and they've respected them. And they've done so much amazing work. And I agree with you. I was in the same camp. I have helped fundraise for core multiple times through multiple nonprofits. So I'm very much someone who was in that mindset of we need to do whatever we can. These core devs, they must be respected. But the game has changed. The game has changed radically over the last several years. Core devs are being paid a lot. Some of them way more than multi-six figures. There's a mass centralization of core development in the United States and also within specific organizations. You have one nonprofit, which houses 3 out of 5 of the current core maintainers in a single office, a single group. You have, I believe, if I remember correctly, the majority, I don't know, I'd have to look up the specific data. And this is also part of the problem is this is very opaque. It's hard to even know what's going on in core because they talk about how transparent it is. And it's actually not that transparent. But from the conversations I've had, and these are not me watching Twitter and looking at what's going on. These are me picking up the phone call to talk to actual real core developers who are questioning what's going on at core. And these are the things that I'm hearing. And one of the things that I keep hearing is that there is a majority of developers now in the United States, and that they're very centralized around New York City and very centralized around San Francisco. There are some in other places. I'm not saying they're only in those places. But I was told, and I need to verify this information to make sure that it's true, but I was told there were 7 maintainers in 7 countries at one point. And now we have the majority of the maintainers in the United States. And people will probably be surprised to hear this, but even though I'm very pro United States and I love my country and I am fought to make my country a leader on Bitcoin, I absolutely do not want the majority of core developers in the United States. I think that's a huge mistake. And I think it's a centralization problem and it's a groupthink problem. And that we need to make sure that we are vigilant about rooting out centralizing forces within Bitcoin. And I believe that there is a centralizing force within the core development community. And I know there's plenty of core developers who are amazing. They're great. And we would love them to come work on knots, which leads me to my next point. We can't just be fighting against core. We have to be fighting for something. And I believe that is knots right now. Now, that could change. There could be other implementations. I'm not saying there won't be, but right now, the battle is to get behind and unify behind knots and to start supporting what Luke is doing and also get more developers to focus on knots as well, which is why I launched the Decentralization Defense Fund, which is an organization or a fund underneath of my currently existing Satoshi Action Education 501c3. The reason why I did that is because it enables me to utilize the structure immediately. I don't have to spend $10,000 to go set up a new 501c3. I don't have to wait 6 months for the IRS to approve my nonprofit because right now, the fight is right now. The fight is between now and October. And then, of course, it's going to continue on. But there are big moments happening right now. But the goal of the DDF, or the Decentralization Defense Fund, is going to be coalesce resources, the same as other nonprofits have done for core, and help support Luke, but also to help support and bring in other developers. And I am currently in conversations with multiple current core developers to switch and move away from core and move over to knots, including someone who is interested in maintaining knots. To me, the biggest attack vector on Knots right now is that it is ran by one guy, which is definitely not true, but we need to be doing more and more and more to get more people focused on it so that we can just obliterate this FUD, because we're obliterating FUD left and right, but I don't truly believe that this FUD will be totally obliterated until we have another very public maintainer of Bitcoin Knots. And so that's one of our number one goals. The number two goal is also to build the bug bounty program out, which is something that Core doesn't even have. They don't even have a bug bounty program. So we are establishing the first bug bounty program for Knots. And the goal of that will be to help drive funding. Now, it's not going to be some crazy thing like Apple and Google. They pay you like $1 million to find a bug. Like, this is not that going to mirror those levels of compensation. But the point is to drive more incentive for more people to look at the code and to drive confidence in the code. And we know there are developers out there and hackers out there who would love to take a look at the Bitcoin code and review it, but they don't get any money from it. So we just want to change that narrative a little bit and change the incentive structure there to say, okay, you're not going to get rich overnight, but you can make a difference and there will be some money waiting for you if you do find some type of vulnerability in Bitcoin Knots. So those are the number one and number two. Number three, though, and I think this is probably just as important, is the process by which development takes place needs community engagement. There needs to be a process by which the community, the node runners, the users are actually listened to and communicated with, which is very much the polar opposite of what's happening in Core right now. They're telling you your node doesn't matter. They're telling you that you can go run whatever you want. Oh, you don't like it? Go run Knots. Like, they don't even care about you. You are their number one user base. And then when someone said that recently, Lop turned around and said, well, maybe they're just working for another user base. Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point. Like, they're not working for the current user base, who is all a bunch of node runners that are running their software. They're trying to find a new user base for new use cases. And that's a problem. Like, I'm going to be against that. Like, I want someone who represents my interests. And there's a fun analogy for the gamers out there. For a long time, if you're in the gaming community with Call of Duty and Battlefield, like, Call of Duty has sort of become this, like, very much like this, like, Twitch streamer, like, financial, like, engine for themselves, where they're selling skins all the time. And, like, the Twitch streamers are gaming and doing all these weird things on it and, like, marketing and yada, yada. Well, Battlefield 6 comes along and it's simple. It's streamlined. It's real. It feels like real warfare. Like, there's not like all these crazy weird skins and like crazy like maps you can go to. It's very much like, it feels like you're really in war. Like, I hadn't played a video game in so long, and I was like addicted to this thing during the beta because it was just so cool. Like, it was so fun the way that they had designed it. And you know what happened? All the Twitch streamers came out and said, I hate this game. You need to change it. You need to do a battle pass. You need to bring the skins into the game. And all the users were like, no, that's not what we want. We don't want that. We want a game that actually we like to play. And of course, the Battlefield folks were like, screw the streamers. Like, let's go with the user base. And that's what's happening in Knots versus Core. You have Core who's like, yeah, we're going to do this for other users and for the developers and for other use cases. And the node runners are like, well, that's not what we want. We just want Bitcoin. And so Knots comes along and is like, you want Bitcoin? You want decentralized Bitcoin? You want Bitcoin that's going to be a money and a payment system for now and for generations to come? And you don't have to worry about the hard supply cap going away or other core principles of Bitcoin going away. And we're going to make sure that it's affordable for as many people as possible to run nodes. Like, here you go. Like, we'll do that. And so that's why you're seeing this mass migration. You're seeing it in Call of Duty to Battlefield 6, and you're seeing it in Core to Knots, because Knots is actually representing the users that actually use the technology right now.
Those are powerful words to end this thing on, I think. And if anyone watching wants to help contribute here, like, where on the internet do you want to send them, Dennis? Like, how can they participate?
So it's an embarrassingly early splash page, because I launched it before I got all this ready, because I just was like, I just need to go. I need to do it now. And so don't judge me. It even says on there, this is just a splash page. So, like, total web design redevelopment coming through. And that's true across all the Satoshi Action brand. We're redesigning all the websites. So, but people can go to satoshiaction.org/DDF. And that's going to be a splash page where they can kind of just read the early mission statement, how that blends into our past work at Satoshi Action. And there's a, Bitcoin address they can donate, or an LN static QR code, which took me forever to figure out how to do. Well, this is the fun part about this too, is like, this is invigorating my, like, doing Bitcoin again. Like, I've like been really doing politics for a while, and now I'm like, oh, I got my new Start 9 node. I got Knot's on there. I downloaded LND and Core Lightning, which are two Lightning implementations. And I got my Lightning channels opened up, and I set up was doing the invoicing. And then I was like, I need a static QR, which I've never done the static QR. And I got a static QR. And so, I was trying to do it the difficult way, and I ended up having to do the get Albi way. So that was disappointing, but I'm there for now. So needless to say, people can go to satoshiaction.org/DDF. Don't judge the page. There's a lot more coming. We have a bug bounty program coming. We have a whole document coming on like what we're going to be doing through that entity and why it matters, and the work that we'll be pursuing. And we'll be really trying our best to work as closely with the community and also Knots developers in the process. So if people want to donate, they can. We've already raised $100,000. We're trying to raise $1 million. Core has $8 million. So we definitely need people who are interested. And we found some folks that are also like big time community members that are interested in participating. So if you want to do more than just like donate, and you feel like you are in a position to, give back time in a way that will be meaningful beyond just like tweeting, definitely hit me up, and definitely tweet too. But we want some people that would be interested in being like dedicating some energy to it.
Fantastic. I have a Start9 here behind me, or the box for one. The actual one is over there running Knots right now. And so I urge everyone to Start9 is a very good little machine. You could get your hands, and I think they're killing it. They're selling so many servers. It's it's great.
Hey, you should know though that Start9, great company. Talk to Matt, the CEO over there, big fan.
Yeah.
You can buy the computer. You should buy the computer because that's what funds the project. And you can also download StartOS for free, which is their operating system for a node. So you don't have to. Like if you have a really nice computer that you want to use, I generally try to convince people to do an independent node. Like don't put it on your main computer. You could if you wanted to, but it's typically better for bandwidth reasons and all sorts of other security reasons. But you can download the operating system for free. I think you should buy the computer because it's good to support their project, but basically free to run a node as far as like a hardware perspective or a software perspective. You just need something to run it on.
Yeah. Anyway, Dennis, thank you very much for this talk. And yes, people, don't forget to like, subscribe, and brush your teeth. And see you in the next one. And don't miss the Bitcoin Infinity Academy. We're doing my second book here, Bitcoin Independence Reimagined. It's the other show on this channel. So check that out. You're welcome to check it out too, of course, if you want, Dennis. So, yeah. Thank you very much anyway.